We're ready to go. Is everyone ready? Yes? Fantastic. Okay, so welcome to the ELLICSR Kitchen, everyone. My name is Jeremy Capone. I'm the wellness chef here.
And I'm Stephanie Gladman, the registered dietitian. And in today's class, we're going to talk about foods to help manage taste changes. So cancer and cancer treatments, such as chemotherapy, surgery, radiation to the head and neck, and even some medicines can cause changes to the way that foods taste. Now, sometimes these taste changes could last during treatment and then get better over time, but in other cases, it can sometimes last longer. And this can be sometimes frustrating because when foods don't taste the way they usually do, then people sometimes have a loss of appetite where they don't feel like eating. This could lead to weight loss. And therefore kind of affect your energy levels, sometimes your ability to finish treatment, or even just for healing and recovery. So some of the most common taste changes could be foods tasting bland or not having a taste at all, or even just they're too salty, or they're too sweet, or they're bitter, or they have that metallic taste. So in today's class specifically, we're going to talk about some of the most common ones that we see. There are obviously others, but we're going to focus on when you're having, what to do and what foods to use if you're having a metallic taste, a salty taste, or having a sweet taste. Okay. So the first recipe, we're going to have a kind of a spin-on of a barbecued chicken. And so, like I said, one of the most common ones that patients report is that metallic taste. And sometimes people say that red meat often kind of brings out that metallic taste. So using poultry or chicken is one way to kind of offset that. But obviously there's other proteins like egg or Greek yogurt or using skim milk powder that could help with that, other protein options. But to balance that metallic taste with something sweet, so like a barbecue sauce or a teriyaki sauce, or even something tart, like lemon or lime, vinegar, or pickle. So why don't you show us kind of some of those tips on how to do a spin of a teriyaki, barbecue.
Yeah, so to highlight a lot of what Stephanie just talked about in regards to the metallic taste, the first recipe is focusing on some of that sweetness, some of that tartness that Stephanie mentioned. But the first thing I think we should tackle in terms of metallic taste is the actual cooking utensils and elements themselves as well, right?
So obviously when you're eating, using kind of more plastic utensils or avoiding the stainless steel.
Yeah, glass bowls. Some of the your containers if you use glass or plastic. For pots and pans, it's a little more difficult. There's not many glass pans or pots out there, but there is a couple things that you can do in order to limit the amount of contact that you do have with any of your metal utensils. So we're going to be slow braising this chicken. This is a technique where we're going to slow cook it in a little bit of liquid. That liquid's going to be a really nice barbecue sauce, which we're going to make in a second. But I want to sear the chicken first. We want to get a little bit of color, right? So I do have this is a steel pan here. But what I can do, again, to limit the contact is use parchment paper. Now we've talked about the use of parchment paper in this class quite a bit, mainly because I don't like doing dishes, and I'm sure many people feel the same way. So it's a great way to create sort of a non-stick barrier so that nothing sort of burns or sticks to your baking dishes or pots or pans. And it also requires less of a fat barrier, so you can control that as well. But especially for this case where we do want to limit the amount of contact with the pan, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sear it in the pan with the parchment as that sort of barrier. So what I want to do is I can either cut out a small piece and put it in, or because I'm going to be roasting, I'm going to slow cook it entirely in this pan, I want to cut off a piece that's almost twice as big as my pan itself. And then with that piece, we're going to run it under water and crunch it up just like this, just so it becomes much more malleable, right? So now I can open it up. Instead of sort of a flat piece of paper trying to stick it in to the corners, it's gonna be a lot easier like this, right? Do this off the heat, it's a little bit safer. But we're doing a show here, so I wanna make sure we're primed up. But what I'm doing is I'm making sure that it's coming in contact with the bottom so that I'm getting that searing action. I got the heat penetrating through, but I wanna try to get a little bit over the lip as well, because we're going to be pouring some liquid in here. So I want to make sure that it doesn't sort of sneak underneath. So we have something like this. Pretty straightforward. You can do this exact same thing if I wasn't doing it in a pan, and let's say I just had like a baking dish, right? And I don't have a glass baking dish. They have nice glass baking dishes, but if I didn't have one, the exact same thing. You can line it with your parchment paper, and whether you're doing this chicken barbecue dish like we're doing today, or you're doing like a peach cobbler, or anything that's gonna go into the oven, this is a great way to limit the amount of contact with the metallic pans. Okay, so all on board? Mm-hmm. Ready? Okay, for the first part of the recipe, we wanna sear our protein. So yes, like Stephanie mentioned, we're avoiding the red meat. We're using some poultry today, but you could use like fish too.
Yeah, you could absolutely fish, tofu, whatever type of protein you wish to use. Protein is important, especially to help build muscle, repair and recovery, but also provide you with your body with essential vitamins and nutrients like vitamin B12, iron, zinc. These are the ones that are providing you with that energy and fuel.
So another thing too, I almost did it, is a lot of your utensils might be made out of metal, and again, it's important to limit that contact. So maybe go for the ones that they have like the silicone, the food grade ones. Lean more towards those, and that will help again as well. So I've got a medium high heat on my pan. I'm gonna add a little bit of olive oil. Again, I don't need too much. A small drizzle, and you can season it with whatever you like. For simplicity, we're just doing salt and pepper on this.
Now, especially those who have head and neck cancer, sometimes there might be issues with swallowing or chewing. So really making sure that you're using a protein that's soft so that you can chew and swallow. We're gonna be braising it, so it's kind of gonna be fall off the bone, but just something to keep in mind if you are having issues with the chewing and swallowing.
Yeah. So we're gonna sear this just a couple minutes per side just to get some color. And you can hear from the sizzle that heat is coming through the parchment paper, right? Now with parchment paper, sorry, I'm going off screen for a second.
Hello.
With parchment paper, it's important to note that it's heat tested up to 425 degrees Fahrenheit usually. It will say on the box, it could be 400 to 425. Typically don't bake anything higher than that. We're doing a very slow and low cook, so we're going to 350, which is in the lower end. It won't catch fire. It'll just sort of burn and disintegrate. So, just so you know. All right. So I'm setting one up in the oven. The secrets. Okay, so we have our chicken searing here, and we're going to be making our own barbecue sauce. Like Stephanie mentioned, with metallic taste, we're trying to lean towards sweet things, right?
So bringing in those sweet flavors. Obviously, making your own is, you're able to control how much sugar or salt you're adding into the dish. So, if you wanted to do that, that's an option as well.
Yeah, and we're making our own. You can buy one. That's going to be the easiest case. And they have lots of barbecue sauces. You probably have your favorite, and you can just skip to that step, right? Of searing the chicken, adding your barbecue sauce, and then into the oven. That wouldn't be a fun cooking show though. So we're gonna make our own. So we're doing peaches. We're gonna make a peach barbecue sauce. This is our sticky peach barbecue sauce. I've seen probably the last little bit of the season in grocery stores. So if you do see them, grab them. Otherwise, use frozen.
Yeah. So you wouldn't want to use canned peaches or any type of thing because in that situation, the metal from the can could leach into the food and also cause that taste change. So using fresh is great, but also frozen. Just as nutritious as fresh, it's a process that locks in those nutrients, so there's no need to worry about whether the nutrients are not as potent.
Yeah.
Definitely, we always suggest lots of frozen fruit or vegetable when it's not in season.
Yeah, the canned one, in this case, we would want to avoid.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have a little bit of fresh and frozen. We just peeled them, and they went in here. We're going to get a lot of sweetness from this. Sorry? You don't have to. No. It's just more of a textural thing. If you don't mind some of the peel in there, then yeah, you can leave it on.
Yeah.
Stephanie likes to leave the skins on sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So,
Gives more fiber.
yeah.
But again, if somebody's having swallowing or chewing issues,
Yeah.
that might be something you'd want to remove.
Okay, seasoning now. Again, this is up to you. We're trying to go for obviously more of that barbecue flavor, but this is something you probably want to experiment with as well.
And that's the other thing. Everybody is so different. It's always about experimentation. So if something doesn't taste, if it tastes bad or it doesn't taste great, it's always good to maybe in a month try it again later, or experiment with the different flavors so that you're finding something that works for you.
Yeah.
And also being patient, because often with taste changes, it could be one of those things that's frustrating, but constantly trying new foods and new flavors to help balance off whatever changes in taste you're experiencing.
So smoked paprika, it's the first thing I added. That's going to bring a lot of smokiness, and I go a little bit extra with the smoked paprika. We have garlic powder here, just granulated garlic, and a little bit of turmeric as well. Turmeric you don't need as much. Usually put half or even less in there. And we're going to add some thyme. So you can add dried herbs if you want, or the fresh. Usually the difference, if I'm adding fresh herbs, I would add about 3 times as much as the dried. And the same thing going the other way. Go 3 times as less if you're going from fresh to dried. So a little bit of thyme in there. And thyme with peaches also goes really well together. Now we're going to add a little bit of the acidity, which you'll find in barbecue sauce. So I'm adding lime juice.
Yeah, and if there's any sores in the mouth, these are things, the tart, the lemon, the lime, that's something you might want to not include, but you could use the skin, right? Like grate
Absolutely.
it.
Use the zest. You're going to get a lot of the lime flavor in there.
Yeah, just in case you're experiencing any sores in the mouth or throat.
Yeah. And then the same with this as well. We're adding a little bit of apple cider vinegar because we're going more for that tartness,
Yeah.
as you mentioned. But again, that's something you would want to, you can omit that as well. Tomato paste. Tomato paste is sort of our secret weapon. Anytime we make stocks or sauces, it is very high in what we call umami. Has anyone heard of umami before? If you come to our class, I speak about it maybe too much. So umami is that sort of savoriness. It is sort of a flavor bomb, we call it, when we add it to our thing. So this is something that, again, might pick up the flavor.
Yeah.
It adds a ton of it's concentrated tomatoes, so it adds a ton of that umami. Okay, and then we're gonna add some, the sweetness. So we're gonna add some honey. Honey is gonna help. Obviously the peaches are sweet, but it's not gonna be sweet enough, and especially for a barbecue sauce, we do want some more of that sweetness. Yeah. So we're adding about a 1/4 cup of honey to this. And if you need more, it's always the end of the bottle that sounds the best. Getting a thumbs up from the guys in the back, right? Yeah, all right. We're gonna add a little bit of stock as well. And the stock is gonna thin it out a little bit. Because we are cooking this in the oven, we're slow braising in the oven, I want it a little thinner than a traditional barbecue sauce because this is gonna reduce quite a bit. So the same principle, if you were not gonna go through this process to make your own and you're just adding store-bought barbecue sauce, thin it out a little bit, even with just some water, because it's going to reduce quite a bit, and you don't want it to burn. Because of the sugar content, if it reduces too much, then it's going to burn in the oven.
Is this beef stock? Or?
That's chicken stock.
Oh, chicken.
Yeah, because I'm using chicken stock, but it could just be water. It's whatever you have, vegetable stock, whatever you have. All right, so we're going to blend it up. Awesome. Beautiful.
You don't have garlic powder. How much garlic would you put in?
You put as much as you like. Yeah.
And that just depends, like depending on the taste changes. Some people, might find it doesn't, go because of their taste changes. So it's just something, again, to experiment with.
So a little bit, you can season it with a little bit of salt and pepper if you want at the end. But the color is amazing on this. Very peachy, wouldn't you know? And we're ready to go with this. So the chicken, I'll show you here. I'll take it off. See the color. So it sears beautifully. And we'll sort of create this little barrier between the bottom. That'll give it some flavor as well. The garlic is something I like to add almost like in a big chunk. So I'll cut the bottom off and I'll add it like this. Garlic is one of those things where it can be, well, it is very hot. It can be very aggressive, I think, on the palate. So might not be one thing in its raw state that's enjoyable, but as it cooks down, especially as it slow cooks, it's going to start to become very sweet. You're going to lose a lot of that heatness, and it's going to be very, very sweet, and it's going to add to the sweetness in the dish as well.
The other thing is the way that Jeremy put it in. Sometimes we crush it, chop it, but if it's something that's not good for you, maybe you just want the taste, but you don't want the actual eating kind of the garlic, you could always remove it.
Absolutely. So now I'm going to go in with my sauce, and depending on the pan, you might need to add a little bit more or less, but the idea is that when I put the chicken in, it should be mostly submerged, not completely, but it should be mostly submerged. And it's this is the braising part. This is where we're slow cooking in a liquid. So like Stephanie mentioned before, if you desire something that's a little bit softer in terms of texture, this is exactly what we're looking for. This is going to be very, very soft. It's going to fall apart and become super tender. So even if we're using, so I have some chicken thighs and chicken breasts. Chicken breasts can become pretty tough, right, if you overcook it. Well, by the time that we're putting it in there, it would be technically overcooked, but you couldn't tell because it's going to be super, super soft.
Yeah.
Tartness.
Yeah.
Like Stephanie mentioned, we're going to add some lime to this as well. Again, this is optional depending on your preference. And I'm just cutting it in half and I'm putting it in whole like this. That's going to flavor the sauce. And then again, like the garlic, as it slowly cooks in there, you're going to lose a little bit of that tartness. It's going to become sweet as well. So that's it. So that's ready to go. Now again, this is oven proof, so I can go straight into the oven. If it wasn't, you just do that exact same thing in your prepared pan, and that'll go into the oven. So 350 degrees for about an hour.
Yeah.
And we're looking for a little bit of color on the top, and for the sauce to reduce by about half.
Yeah.
So it should shred apart like really easily. Then it's done.
And if it's not pureed enough or soft enough, you could always puree it, right? If that's something.
Yeah.
But foods that are soft and saucy often help, especially if someone's having issues swallowing or chewing.
And that's it. So the way I like to finish is get the limes out, and it's like syrup at this point. Really, really tasty. So that can go over top. I'll show you the garlic as well. It's usually my favorite part. So the garlic on top should also just kind of squeeze right out.
It's going to be quite sweet, like caramelized.
Is it just me that gets excited about the garlic especially. And that's it. That's
Yeah.
the sticky peach. Yeah.